Okay. Well, I don't know who's bringing questions, but I have one to discuss that was sent to me to explain the difference between emotional experience and emotional expression. And with the note that these can be often misunderstood. Well, actually, I think it's quite simple. The experience of emotion is what we feel inside us. Like we feel fear or we feel anguish or something, but it's an internal feeling that is different from the other internal feelings. But the expression is something that's on the outside of you. Did you go, ah, or oop, or smile, or scowl? Those are all expressions of the emotions that you're feeling. So the expressions are on the outside of us. And of course, then that can continue on to actions that we might undertake, like running away or hugging somebody or, something like that. But that's what I would see as the differences.
Can I just ask about that, Richard? Okay. So experience is within and the expression is without. But on the Shen bed, can one be converted, as it were, to the other?
No,
for example,
that one leads to the other, but you can't. If you're saying, could you convert a scowl to a smile? Well, that's
no. I mean, if for example, somebody is expressing or has got to the stage of expressing, does that mean, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily experiencing, does it?
Well, I think what you're saying is that they may say, I'm very angry,
Yeah.
but it doesn't sound like it. It's more like they say, oh yes, I'm really happy, but they're scowling. In other words, the people lie. They tell stories because they don't want to upset the person in front of them. They don't want to acknowledge what's going on. I've seen that a lot, where people have emotions below the surface that are hidden under their expressions. And one case comes to mind from years ago when somebody was expressing grief about her mother's passing, but she was furious at her mother and had never got a chance to tell her. So underneath this facade of, oh, I'm sad my mother's gone, was this raging storm, which came up on the table and finished itself, and then she was able to be more in touch with her grief. I don't know if this has anything to do with what you're talking about, but sometimes interns get in a situation where they're where they've cajoled somebody into being a patient or to come for Shen, when the person doesn't really is not really interested in getting Shen for themselves, but they either feel obligated or some other reason, and so they're on the table unhappy about being there and really being upset that somebody's trying to get them into their emotions because they really don't want to be in their emotions.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen when people come and pay their money to, though occasionally somebody comes and has come because their parents insist that they do, or their children insist that they do, and they really don't want to be there. And if you're going to work with them, you've got to deal with that. And you've got to bring it up to, you've got to allude to it on the surface where you treat it as a reality, that this is what their uppermost emotion is, and let them get into that, and try to finish it with the flows that you do. And if you do, it's very likely that they would be very surprised that there is actually they've been playing this game and there were actually something else going on. And that the very least would be that they'd stop coming and stop bothering you with working for no good reason.
Mhm. Yeah.
People don't want to believe a lot of children have suffered abuse at the hands of a parent, and sometimes sexual abuse at the hands of a grandparent or something like that, where they have these really mixed feelings about what's going on. They're afraid of it. They don't want to acknowledge it. They oh well, he really loves me, and when in fact he's harming them, or she. So that to look at the larger issue, which is conflicted emotions, you have to get a grasp on what they are. And sometimes it's just merely saying, wait a minute, I think there's conflicted emotions here, and you can follow them as they move from one to the other. And then you'll just have to devise a way to say, oh, well, let's work on that. And for right now, we'll work on the other part later and try to resolve whatever's in the road so that you can get down to the kernel of whatever's going on.
Yeah, thank you. So would you say, Richard, that on the Shen bed, if somebody is expressing emotion, as in crying and so on, would you say that that is a sign that they're actually repressing the experience?
Well, I know all you could say is, are you saying that they're expressing it?
Through, well, they
Means that
say
like there's somebody crying?
yeah, or you know, whatever physical.
Well, invite them to go into that and go deeper.
Mm.
And just let that come out. And very often when it does come out, then there will be a certain, you just have to look at it, there's a certain quantity of that.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes out, then whatever's below it will come out, or will come up to the surface.
Yeah, thank you.
How about the rest of you? Anything anything else somebody wants to bring up to discuss?
I wasn't expecting to be able to make it, so I didn't think I should bring anything up. I can't think of anything at the moment.
No, that's all right. Rosie, have you got something?
I'm okay at the moment. Thank you.
Well, how about the next moment?
We'll have to wait and see.
Okay, I can think of a question. It's more a question for the other practitioners, really. Does anybody, if say someone is going to come for a series of sessions, not an intensive, but just a series of, say, weekly sessions, does anyone take money in advance, like for a block, and perhaps give a discount or whatever? That's my first question.
Well, is it okay if I answer it?
Yes, of course.
Well, because you said this is just for the technicians.
No, well, I
so-
meant for everybody, not just for you, Richard.
Well, the answer is yes to both.
Okay.
I have a fee set for a session, and if they take a block of 10, I reduce it about 10 or 15%, and they pay up front.
Right, yeah.
But,
And what happens? Sorry, you haven't finished.
well, I deposit the check.
Yep. And then what happens if they
Actually-
suddenly decide,
Well,
you know, if they decide,
all right,
through
look,
that they
first of
want to
all,
come back.
They don't know it, but I don't deposit the check right away. And the reason that I don't is because if something goes wrong, like I'm not expecting this, but I am 94. I've got a new client starting on Monday. First one in some time, actually, because I was actually closed my practice some years ago, but a woman called me from nearby and said she found me on the web, and that her daughter had suffered who was a teenager in high school, had suffered some trauma a couple of years ago, and she's been in therapy, but both the therapist and mom thinks that she could do with some emotional release work. And so they came to meet me, and I made them the offer, and I expect them to show up tomorrow. They said they're coming and they're excited, and they'll bring me the check, and I'll put it in my desk for a few days. But I am 94, and if something happens that I don't complete the 10,
Yes.
well,
Send it to us, Richard.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you just jump on a plane and come over, you can finish this course for me.
Yeah, no, yeah. I was going to say, it came to my head because I've got a client, a Shen client, who's a psychotherapist, and you know, she was saying that because there was something that came up for her with a client, that she'd you know, that's what she does. She takes she gives a discount and takes money, you know, if they're going to come for a block, a series.
Yes.
And if and she says up front to them, you know, you this, I'm not going to refund this to you. So they don't get a refund.
Yeah.
Unless she decides for some reason to give them one. So I've never done it that way unless people have come for a, you know, an intensive. But we don't really use checks anymore over here. It's just, you know, direct payment into the bank. So don't really have that option, do we, in the UK?
Oh, well, okay, then whatever. Yeah. I don't take credit card. I don't take credit cards for I don't have a card account set up for my services. So
I
I
don't
just take
either.
checks.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's just literally that people either pay cash to me or they pay into my bank account direct.
Yeah.
Do you know what were your plans about this therapist? How many sessions were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking she probably would need 10, but
Well,
she was when she first started, she was very, very timid, and she just said, I want to take it one step at a time. So that, the issue of this
okay.
at the beginning when she first came wasn't an issue. It didn't even occur to me. But in
Well,
passing,
yeah, now you can bring it up if you want.
well, she put it into my head because she was talking about her client
Yeah, I
and that
know, I know.
yeah.
Um,
So
I have had one person, very interesting. This guy had tinnitus, and they couldn't, really bad, ringing of the ears all the time. And I've had a couple of cases of those, and I've managed to cure them pretty quickly by working at the cough.
wow.
But anyway, he was coming over from Israel. So he comes over from Israel, and he was coming for 10 days, and his parents who lived in the country sent him the check for it. And he shows up in the evening, and I had intended to take him to dinner. But the first thing he says, oh, no, I brought all my own food. Well, it turned out that he's in one of the stricter religious, Jewish religious groups. And it's one where what it really comes down to is that the man in the family goes to school, he becomes a scholar studying the ancient texts, and that's all he does. So he doesn't produce any work, but his wife does. So, and I'm sure many of you have run into the very dominant Jewish mother. They're not all, but that they're certainly known. And he was very timid. And I thought, oh boy, this he's got an explosion underneath there. It's just tamped down, and it's just he's being told by what to do by his parents and his mother. But anyway, so I took his money and we started to work. And for the first 3 sessions, there was just nothing. And I was working with him. I think 3 sessions a day. And we didn't get anywhere for the first couple of days. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, evidently, it broke loose, and he was furious. And he goes to the telephone and he tries to book his flight out so he can leave the next morning because all this anger is coming up. And he came in the morning and he said, well, I couldn't get a flight out this morning this quickly, so I'm going to be here, and I guess I'll come for today. And so the stuff started coming out. He never did figure out. And I was not in a position where I could say, look, you've been repressed for years by these women telling you what to do, and you've just discovered that, and you're angry. And I think it's pretty appropriate. And I think we need to get through it and get you down to a settled out place. But he left about a day early. Oh, yeah. And the tinnitus was gone, which I didn't consider the tinnitus was more than a symptom anyway. And so he left directly. And I never did find out any more about it. Unfortunately, that was at a period of time when Israel cut off certain, they cut off mail from Microsoft Network, Microsoft MSN.com, where I say, so my emails would be bounced. They're blocked from coming in. And I did try to get a hold of his parents in Florida and to inquire as to how he was doing, ostensibly about the tinnitus, but I never heard back from everybody. But that was the only time that I've ever worked with someone where I never completed the 10 sessions.
Right.
I've had, and I haven't done a lot of them, but I have more recently, a woman had been getting some shen from another practitioner in the state, but at a different location. And this person really, I thought it was doing wonders for her. And she bought 10 sessions for her 18-year-old daughter who had gotten hooked on cocaine and was going through and was recovering from that. And the results were so good that the woman paid for 10 sessions for her daughter's best friend who had gone through the same stuff that her daughter had. Anyway. Well, I don't know, but I guess that's probably all I've got to say on that issue. Yeah.
Richard, yeah, what you said brings up a question for me. Ear ringing and cath. That's interesting.
Yep. Are you asking me to explain that?
Yes, please.
Oh, well, no, thank you. I do not have a direct explanation for that. It came about when I had a woman who was clearly having cough-related issues, but what she talked about was the tinnitus. And I worked on her for a couple of sessions, and the tinnitus disappeared, and her emotions started evolving, and the stuff that was bothering her started to come up. And then I worked with someone else later that I've forgotten. But I've now worked with 3 people with tinnitus, and with success.
Very good. Yeah, I suppose it makes sense. People with tinnitus, it's really annoying. It's really annoying me.
Oh yeah.
So there's emotion there.
That's about the only thing I've ever worked with that I wasn't able to explain a very direct link, a very obvious link.
Yeah.
So I've approached it with caution in both the second and third events. The second event I said, well, I'm not sure I can, but I did have success once, and we'll give it a try. And then that one worked. So when they and they worked with fewer sessions, but I wanted to the 10 sessions seemed much more appropriate in this case, because there were indications that there was a lot else going on emotionally that was like the very fact that this guy was not coming. He's an adult, he's married, he's got I think 3 children, and he's not making the appointment. His parents are making the appointment, and his wife is making the appointment through the parents. Well, right away, there's a chain of emotional crap going on for this guy that says he's shut down and repressed. And when I saw him, I just took one look at him. And he was this little hunched over, pulled in guy that was doing everything exactly perfect character. And he had his backpack and everything was packed just so, and he had all of his rations for each meal, and he couldn't dare to go to a restaurant with me. I was going to take him to dinner so he could relax and we could talk a little bit about, get through the initial meeting trauma, and because he didn't know me from Adam and didn't know what this strange stuff was, and anyway, so
It reminds me of it. Sorry. What? It reminds me of an intensive that I did when I was in Turkey. I had a woman phone me because I was living in England, but going out to Turkey and sometimes doing intensives. And she called me from Pakistan to the UK, was very interested to come and do an intensive. And after much discussions, and because I knew she had some mental health problems, we decided between us that she would go ahead. So she came, she paid me up front. She came and stayed in my apartment in Turkey, and I was in my house. Okay. And I mean, she really struggled with the sessions. There was a lot of resistance and a lot of fear coming up. And I think it was the second or the third day she decided she didn't want any more. And she was half thinking about going home, but then she said, well, can we change to another therapy? It was not easy, but I convinced her to continue with Shen, and boy, did she, I thought there was going to be a big problem with what to do with her in a foreign country in this condition, but luckily it all settled, and she came through it, and she made some big changes when she got home, so that was brilliant. But it was a difficult situation because we were both in a different country. She'd arranged, we'd pre-arranged that if she got into trouble that her father would come and accompany her and take her back, and he was quite happy to do that, but luckily it didn't come to that.
Yeah, good. Yeah, working with people in the repressive Muslim sects and working with the Jewish people is very difficult because they have very repressive a very repressive life. And I won't spend a lot of time on it, but a woman came to me in London, and she was with a woman where she had children, and she was in one of the most repressive Jewish, I almost want to say cults. The men always wore these black hats and wide-brimmed hats, and the women all trailed behind, and the women had no power at all. And after several sessions, her husband wanted to meet me to find out what the stuff was that his wife was doing. And he insisted that I give him a session. So he lies on a table, doesn't relax at all. And I placed my hands, and then he said, and we were going to go to lunch. Well, he said, we'll go to lunch, we'll have lunch, and then we'll do some more. Well, it turned out he'd made sandwiches for our lunch. And he'd made 3 sandwiches, and we each had one. And then he says, hopefully, did you want another? Because he didn't want to give it to me. He wanted it for himself. And he was very upset when I accepted it, because one sandwich was not enough for me. And we never went anywhere with the session because he said he was trying to use it. They had some charity set up where they worked with little children who had been traumatized, And they wanted to see if this would be good for them. Well, of course it would be, but you couldn't get past the rigidity of the. I never got it opened up to be able to do that because it was such a ball of wax. It didn't want to unravel. But yeah, you do have to be careful. There are other factors affecting how that person affecting your client. And you can't tell them. I mean, you can't go in there and directly argue against. I mean, you can try to rationalize it with the dominant person in the situation, but yeah, you've got to be careful about how you do that. All right, is there anything else? If not, I think we'll just close this off and. All right, I think I'll